I'd like to reconvene the Washington Unified School District regular monthly board meeting. If I can have, is there a teacher in the audience? No, I'm just kidding. Can I have Michelle Pyle lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcement of action taken in closed session. Item number 1, Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, WTA, CSEA, and management, Assistant Superintendent Landsberg and Assistant Superintendent Peachin in attendance. Information was received. Item number 2, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline Dismissal Release. Direction was given. Item number 3, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Performance Evaluation Superintendent. Information received. Item number 4, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Superintendent Search. Information was received. I, Communications and Celebrations. Dr. Gillian.
Thank you, President Cruz, members of the board. I'm pleased to announce a number of celebrations this evening. First, we want to recognize and thank CSEA in the House this evening for their generous donation of $250 for the USD Employee Appreciation Game at Raley Field this year. We also want to recognize and thank Bobo Construction, Inc. for their generous donation of $250 for the same event, the Employee Appreciation Game at Raley Field. I want to recognize and thank the law firm of Gerard and Edwards for their generous donation of $500 for the Employee Appreciation Game at Raley Field. We also want to recognize and thank Rotary Club West the Centennial Group for their generous donation of $557.05 for the purchase of books for the Bridgeway Island Library. Those are our celebrations this evening.
Thank you. We have student board report.
Good evening. Good evening. My microphone's not working. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will be starting with Bridgeway news. Bridgeway held a Common Core Math Parent Night Wednesday, March 11th. We will be hosting our middle school grade science fair all day on March 19th in the school cafeteria. Student projects will be on display for all the classes to come and enjoy. Bridgeway will be sponsoring the Out of the Box Food Drive, a community service project from March 23rd through 27th. Students bring in donations of non-perishable items that will be collected for the food bank here in West Sacramento. River City news. Our outstanding big band, coordinated by Tony Marvelli, has placed first for their division at the Wood Creek Jazz Festival competition.
Ooh, nice. That's the trophy.
Their overall score was 9/10 of a point lower than Folsom High School. Also, the River City Academic Assembly was a success. Many students and their families came out to receive their awards and celebrate our students' academics. And this is all for student reports.
Thank you. WTA.
Hello again. First, I'd like to acknowledge a number of my colleagues who are taking time off of their busy Thursday evenings to come here tonight and watch this board meeting. Thank you for coming. After I speak, Steve Savage, our CTA, primary contact staff, will say a little bit as well. Just to reiterate what I brought to you before you went into closed session, teachers have been working without a contract since the beginning of this school year. We believe we've made a salary proposal that is fair. We believe our salary proposal is within the district's budget. And we believe our salary proposal will help the district recruit quality educators and will help retain and sustain educators already working within this district. On to LCAP. I'm continuing to have conversations with the district on the LCAP process and believe there's a lot more work to be done, and I'm including me on that work end thing. It's not just me pointing a finger at somebody else. And it's obviously a new process for every school district, and the report itself is very hard to read, and it's taking me longer to get a grip on it than I would have wished. But again, it has to do with the format of the report itself. But I would like to make a couple recommendations, which I haven't mentioned to our folks yet, and that is that we rely more on the site councils for input, and that we perhaps bring them more formally into the process. I think they have a lot to say, and since they are already a group of stakeholders within the district, it's a way of getting some good input from people who are already committed and who are already involved. And additionally, establish regular meetings amongst a group of stakeholders, perhaps represented from the site councils, and do this on a continual basis. And I know some districts have standing committees that do meet on a regular basis to work on the LCAP, much like a site council does work. I also want to talk a little bit about the job opening for the Director of Information Technology. For me, this seems like a great opportunity to do some good stuff now that we are in the midst of upgrading technology and also getting prepared to roll out the new computer-based state testing, Smarter Balance. And I noticed on the job description that's posted, there was no reference on the website to one-on-one devices, which is one of the things we're doing. No reference to Google applications or Android. There was no reference to tablets or other devices that connect to the Washington Unified servers. There is a reference to routers and networking, but nothing on maintaining a large and various wireless network, which I know is a big project the district's undertaking right now. It would seem to me that those would be very important components, even if there are, as we know, within our organization, there's also another person who helps on the education side of things. I'm almost wondering if it would be a good idea to add something in the job description specifically about working in an educational environment other than just saying you're going to be working in an educational setting, and prioritizing the needs of students in classrooms, because this is what this person is going to be doing. And I'd also like the district to consider moving this job position from a classified management to a certificated management, again, to emphasize the importance that this job has to what goes on in classrooms and making our kids successful. Thank you, and I think Steve Savage will come up.
President Cruz, members of the board, Superintendent Gilliland, members of the cabinet. My name is Steve Savage. I work with the California Teachers Association, and I have the great pleasure of working with the teachers here in Washington Unified School District and with the Washington Teachers Association. Thank you for stepping up for education and doing all you do. We appreciate it. You notice that there's a number of people who also have stepped up tonight who would probably rather be home grading papers. Okay, so let me just say what I've passed out is a little bit of information that comes from the district's own unaudited actuals. There are a number of documents that Scott produces, and he does a great job, works very hard for the district. The interim and the first interim and second interim, a lot of, taking a look at where we are, projecting and estimating. The numbers that I look at are the unaudited actuals, because those are as close, those are real. Those are real numbers. Can't fudge the unaudited actuals. Those are the real thing. So while I sometimes take a look in the rearview mirror, he's looking around the corner at the next 2 years and trying to figure out what's going to happen. I appreciate the hard work that he does for this district, but I wanted to take a look at overall The ending balances are fairly healthy. There was a little dip, and by the way, for the crowd, I'm going to put this over on the side, so there'll be some extras if you want one. In 2011-12, there was a dip down to 2012-13. What a lot of districts did at that time was start to work on restoration. And that means restoring the facilities, doing the repairs that hadn't been done in so long, trying to bring back some programs, trying to come back to where we were from 2008. If you'll notice that before that date, your salaries and benefits together were in the 80%, and they've dipped down to 79%. And when you look at the total amount you spend on all of your people and all of their benefits, we can take that percentage, because it's a different amount in every district, we take that percentage of the budget and we compare them. And if you'll notice, you're in the bottom half of what's available for districts, what districts are spending on salary and benefits. And I believe, and I'm sorry, Ms. Kirby Gonzalez was not here, because Folsom Cordova is somewhere around 85%, and we're 5% lower than that in our efforts on salary and benefits for our members. Now, over the last 2 years, according to Scott's numbers on the LCFF calculator, district has received about 20% new money. Now, we're 42, according to the unaudited actuals, we're 42%. Teachers are 42% of the budget. So ultimately, with salary-driven costs and everything, for every 1% the district gets in, they could give a 2% raise to teachers. That means when you've taken in 20% new money, that could be a 40% raise for teachers. Now, that's not a proposal. We're not asking anything close to that. What we're saying is, according to where you stand in salary and benefits and the new money that you've taken in, that you can do better for your teachers, to attract and retain the best employees possible. And I really hope that when we meet in mediation, we can hammer this out and solve it and get it done, because I think we can do better. Thank you.
CSEA, is Deborah here? No, she is.
Good evening. Just wanted to let you guys know it's not very much to report tonight, but we have dates already set for negotiation for this year. This is new negotiation, and our date is set March 19th, and we're looking forward and hope that we'll be able to get a lot done and it'll work out for us. But other than that, I have nothing else to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments, and I'll read our disclaimer really quickly. At this time, members of the public may address the board on topics that are under the jurisdiction of the board and are not on the agenda, although the board by law may not take action at this meeting. Education Code 3514535. The board may limit the total time for public input on any topic to 20 minutes unless it chooses to waive the item limit for a particular item. Individual speakers may be limited to 3 minutes to comment on any topic. Public comments consisting of individual charges, complaints, or derogatory remarks about any district employees are requested to be submitted in writing to the administration in accordance with district's complaint procedure. I have Lila Barrett.
Hi, my name is Lilia Barrett. Oops. And I have a son at Westmore Oaks, and I have just been informed of a busing situation that you guys were considering extending the parking lot and taking our children's, well, my child's, the tennis courts over, extending the parking lot. And I just wanted to let it be known that there's going to be a big issue with that, because first of all, it's my child's well-being. When he goes out there during his recess time, he's going to be inhaling, fumes. When it gets hot, it's even worse. So I'm just here to say that I'm a concerned parent, and I'd really like to just end it with that. Thank you.
Willow Dakin.
Thank you, Board. My name is Willow Dakin. I am the physical education teacher at Westmore Oaks. 4 to 6 weeks ago, I was informed by my principal that we'd be losing our tennis courts. In these tennis courts, we've been doing hockey there. We've been doing tennis. We've been doing futsal, which is a new sport that uses tennis courts and a soccer ball. Also, the district and myself, we've done training with the entire district on how to teach physical education. I had the opportunity of doing the first grade teachers throughout the district. And one of the things that I taught them was that's very important for all of our students is that they have a safe environment to be at. And our tennis courts at Westmore Oaks provide that safety. When I have a class of 40, I can be 5-on-5. I've got 4 areas. They can be safe, away from the wood chips, away from the recess kids. I still got the noise. I still got the tennis balls going over. And our staff at Westmore Oaks, especially the first grade teachers, they're doing parachuting. They're doing things with the first graders. And the one thing is they said, thank you, Ms. Dakin, for coming into our classroom and showing our teacher how to teach physical education. I've got third grade teachers. Ms. Dakin, can I borrow some PE equipment? Yes, of course you can. Can we use your tennis courts? Because that's a safe area for our kids to work in. We can't use the hoops because recess time has it. And so when I informed my students of this, I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and my first response was from the 8th graders was, this is horrible. When are we going to play hockey? Where are we going to play futsal? When are we going to play our games that you've taught us? When are we going to play tennis that you taught us? And that builds up for the high school. And we have a reputation in West Sacramento for having a great tennis program throughout the district. And it's one of my highlight points that I can offer to my parents. Hey, we've got tennis here. Look what we have. But we're not just using the tennis courts. We use it year-round and so forth. Not only am I using it, but we also have 2 other PE teachers, Ms. Toro and Mr. Workman, who are new staff that were hired. And they have a game called Pac-Man. And the children love it, and it has lines. And all you do is do the lines. You probably saw the Super Bowl commercial that showed Pac-Man, but very cool. They do a little bit differently at our school. And so one of my 7th graders came to me and says, Ms. Dakin, today at lunchtime, can we use the tennis courts that we won't have in 2 weeks because they're taking it away from us? I said, of course, you can. I'll give up my lunch for you, you can do that. And so to lose a space is unfortunate for our student population. It's not just my big kids, it's my kindergartners all the way up to my 8th graders. And they value that space. They value the separation and that and so forth. Mainly it's futsal right now, which is a brand new sport that's come about from Bolivia or Argentina. I'm not quite sure. The ball doesn't bounce, so they don't have to run after it. I mean, even the 2nd graders are like, can we join you? Can we play your 8th graders? Of course you can. I would love that. And our big kids are interacting with the little kids, and they're teaching them that positive culture, what I've strived for the last 14 years. I just felt like we have 3 solutions. I'm done. Can I keep going?
Wrap it up.
Okay, I'm wrapping it up. So instead of putting the parking lot for the bus people, there's 3 solutions. We have a giant parking lot. They can park their vehicles and their personal ones right there. The second solution that could be is extend the bus barn area and organize it to where there's parking for them to have, both the district and. And my third and final solution is, why don't we buy the warehouse that's directly behind them, and they can park there and store their supplies. Thank you for the time.
Raquel Andrade.
Good evening, board members. My name is Raquel Andrade. I'm going to continue what Mrs. Dakin was saying. She's the PE teacher at my kids' school. She's a great teacher, by the way, for the rest of it. I'm going to continue. Her solutions, I took the time this morning to go and take pictures of the people who are supposed to plan to build, to get the parking lots. A bunch of empty spaces there. I was there at 8:15 after I left my daughter. So the The bus drivers or the ones that they need these parking lots, they were outside, and their cars were there. A bunch of parking lots. And they have a special parking place, parking for MOT employees and vendors only, you know? And I don't think to destroy three tennis courts is gonna be, it's not worth it, first of all, you know, because 850 kids, they need those courts. And it's not just the 850 kids that they are right now in school, it's for the future also. And like she said, they use for futsal. And I heard comments that they don't use those courts. They do. Because most of the time I am at school looking what they are doing. I'm always there. And I saw the kids playing there, hockey and futsal, fulbito in Spanish. I hope that it's going to be more popular, this fulbito here in the United States. I hope so, like it is in South America. And I think the money that they are spending there, they probably can donate, or maybe the district could use wisely. Because there was a time that they didn't have paper for the kids to write essays in the school. You know, we can use that instead of using that money for the parking lots. Those are things that probably you guys don't know. We as a parents know because we are there. And I took the time to count the 81 open slots in the parking lot this morning at 9 o'clock. When everybody's parking there. Westmore Oaks has the biggest parking lot probably in the city, in the schools. 81 spaces, free spaces for these people who's complaining about the parking lots, that they can walk a block or 2 blocks away and park there. 81 empty spaces for them to use it. You know, even the buses, they can park there next to the freeway. They have a bunch of space there. And I think that it's I urge the board to consider the decision and look at more productive ways to spend the limited tax dollars. I know you guys are short 12 millions, or maybe use that money to increase the salaries of the teachers, right? So I'm pretty sure you're a very wise women. You will take care of this. And I hope they won't destroy these 3 courts, okay? I have the pictures. I'm going to leave the pictures. And I count on you guys. Thank you so much.
Steve Savage is gone? Yeah, he filled out. Is he gone? So that was for his previous? Okay. Board and superintendent comments. Ms. Villegas?
I just have one announcement. We haven't had a 2x2. I think we have one coming up in April with the city. But I just wanted to let folks know, because a lot of you have been involved in this. We are having the official opening of Phase 1 for the Sycamore Trail, and we're going to have a community barbecue. And this is a collaboration with the Yolo County Children's Alliance, the school district, and the city of West Sacramento, and the RD 900, because that's the sewer line that goes through that this trail is built on. Norma came out and planted 70 fruit trees. We've done a lot of improvements. NCCT has put in picnic tables and benches, but we're having our official opening of Phase 1 on March 31st at 11:30, and everybody's invited to come. I think we'll have some hot dogs and health screenings and whatnot. So mark your calendars, please.
Thank you. Ms. Alcala?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I had a wonderful opportunity to tour Westfield, and I was so impressed. It's one of our older schools, but the enthusiasm of the principal, faculty members was incredible, and it's a really testament to the incredible commitment that our teachers, our staff have to securing that our children are going to be receiving the best academic education they possibly can, safety. It was very impressive, and I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot of the Measure V money used on this school. It was just a wonderful experience, and I also would like to say to Westmore Oaks parents, thank you for coming in. We can't always be at all the school sites, so thank you very much for letting us know what's going on, and wonderful solutions that you're also bringing to us. We often hear concerns, but we don't always hear solutions, so we thank you for that.
Ms. Leland?
Okay, I have one update or just a community event that probably many of you are aware of. The Bowling for Education is taking place tomorrow, so I'm going to be over at Capitol Bowl and just want to thank the West Sacramento Ed Foundation for sponsoring this event because the money goes directly back into the classroom. And then I want to say, since we do have an audience of educators and teachers in our crowd tonight, I just personally want to thank you. I do think in Washington Unified we have the best, and I want to just, tell you that what you do on a daily basis, really gives a lot of us so much pride in Washington Unified. We're doing the best we can do. But I did want to tell you, we appreciate all the extra time and effort that you put into your kids and your classrooms every day. And Norma, I agree with you. I like teachers that bring us not only the problems, but a list of solutions. So thank you very much, too. And just a great opportunity that you came out tonight to be here and represent what you do on a daily basis. And then I want to do just a shout out to a visitor in the audience, Superintendent Mort Guyvet. It's nice to have you tonight. I know you've been a part of this community for a long, long time, and so we welcome you as a visitor to the board meeting. I would think you would be tired of board meetings a little bit, but we're glad you're here. We're glad you're here. And yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I think that's all I have. I just hope everybody's having a good spring and in the height of lots of activities and getting their homework done and getting their homework graded. So it's all good.
Thank you. I too would like to thank all the teachers. It's nice to see you here in another atmosphere than all your classrooms, and I encourage you all to come back and see us whenever your evenings are free. Also, I wanted to remind our board members, if you haven't done so, Mr. Bracey's bullying programs are going around at the schools, so be sure to stop by and see that. Also, probably my last monthly disclaimer, maybe next meeting, the River City Athletic Booster Club, again, we're doing a fish and French fry all-you-can-eat dinner on April 17th. It's a Friday evening. It's the Friday before prom at the VFW Hall in West Sacramento on Drever, and tickets are $20. And if I am correct, I believe some of the band members will be there entertaining us, so come out and see that. And also, I just want to remind everybody that Monday at 5 o'clock in Woodland are the Excellence in Education Awards, and I encourage everybody to come out and cheer on our lovely programs and our administrators that will be getting awards that night. Dr. Gillian.
Thank you. Real quickly, it's been said, but I'd like to reiterate my appreciation on behalf of staff to the Westmore Oaks parents and also the teacher that spoke this evening. Again, we don't often hear solutions and options we can consider, and I would just, on behalf of staff, would like to impart to you that we'll continue this conversation and explore what we need to do to make it right. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Information and discussion items. Number 1, proposed revisions of administrative position, Coordinator of Community Engagement. Is that?
Good evening, President Cruz, members of the board, and Dr. Gilliland. Should I take a few seconds?
Sure.
Do you want me to get it? Are you going to get it? You want me to get it?
Yeah, please.
I gave her mine. Thank you.
Scott was teasing me that I can really clear a room. Anyways, I'm bringing forward some, as an information and discussion item, a revision to an existing job description and an existing position we have. You'll recall last year that one of the positions that was created through the LCAP was one for coordinator of community outreach. And the design behind that was really to be able to more strongly reach out to our parents and our community to provide a great deal more parent education. And there were other items within that that talked about developing a social media presence and a web presence and some other kinds of things. Hearing from the board in some of our recent meetings, and particularly meetings that are board workshop meetings, it's become really clear that we need to really look at that. We have a retirement in that position this year, as you'll see on tonight's agenda, and that we need to really look at how that position might be have even more greater effectiveness. And so you'll see in this job description that we widen the potential field of people that we can draw from by removing the requirement for an administrative credential and removing the requirement that it be a certificated person. And we offer it up as a classified person, which allows us to reach into the fields of journalism and communications and expand the pool of people that we can draw from. You'll also see that there's an emphasis in this position, while there's still the parent education piece that is very, very important and we remain committed to. It really does look at trying to bring people in who have some skills in web presence and Web 2.0, as it's called, social media, media relations, and the ability to work with staff to really increase all of our skills as communicators and in communication. So you'll see the items, you'll see some strike-throughs in items that we've taken out. You'll see italics for items that we've added in. And what we're hoping we've done is to meet the needs that the board has expressed over the last several meetings in terms of what this position can be. So it's offered to you tonight for information discussion. It's not an action item. We can bring it back at a later time for action, but we wanted to hear from you to see if you had any revisions that you wanted to make to these revisions or a direction that you wanted to provide.
Any comments, Ms. Villegas? I'd just like to say this is exciting changes to this position, and I think they're definitely needed. And knowing that there are community partners that offering parenting classes, hopefully this person wouldn't have to be an expert yet, be able to refer them to community-based agencies that do things like that. So I think it's much more important to get somebody in there that can really manage getting the word out. So thank you for making the changes. They seem appropriate. Ms. Leland?
Well, I agree with Board Member Villegas. I think we've heard a lot recently from the community. We continue to really want to reach out in a broader communication platform and using social media and really looking at our website again. I think we made some great strides a couple of years ago to redesign that, but just the upkeep and the look and feel of it, I think it is really important that we consider this component in this job. My only question would be, if you're changing the classification or not requiring an administrative credential, is there a change in the budget on the actual salary or cost for the position?
We've costed that out. It actually is not it doesn't cost as much because it becomes a classified management position. It also allows us more days in the year that the person can work. So we believe it's kind of a win-win. The other piece that we put in there as well, for your consideration, is that in this design, this person works directly with the superintendent, and the idea behind that is there's really more of a direct link to the superintendent and to the board in terms of communication information.
Can I say one more? And I just hope we can match this with Stan's new position for the video class and, get some really cool videos made by high school students on the website and on the Facebook page and whatnot. Ms. Alcala, did you have anything?
No, I was reading through the discussion.
And I'm going from memory, so correct me if I'm wrong. And this will probably sound a little to the board side here, but this person would be the media contact, correct? So we
That's-
wouldn't have to do that, superintendent wouldn't have to, we would be directing all the media, and they would be reporting the good programs, everything we have in the district. That would be this position.
That's correct, and it is looking for specific skills in that area as well.
Oh, one more question. So when are we hoping to fill this?
With your direction, if this is looking okay, what we would probably want to do is bring this back as a consent item so that you're actually approving it as a position. The thinking is that this might be something we'd want to wait for a new superintendent to hire directly, as this person does directly report to the superintendent. But again, that's your decision.
I think that's an important consideration, because they really do need to be able to work together, and in a public information setting, that style and chemistry would be important.
We can post this as soon as it is completed and approved by the board.
So if I'm hearing everything right from the board, I think we will be able to move it to consent next board meeting? Okay.
As is?
And then not hire until after.
Correct, and not hire until a new superintendent is here. Yeah.
Okay.
Was there any modifications by anybody?
I mean, I haven't had an opportunity to read through the whole thing. Can we maybe recommend some modifications, send it to you email? Okay.
Okay. Item M2, discussion, status of WUSD bus fleet and option to lease purchase. Is that Mr. Landsberg?
Good evening. You have in front of you tonight a quick discussion analysis of the condition of your bus fleet. We've talked about this a little bit in the past. We had had conversations about at one point we were going to have to address an aging fleet. We haven't purchased a new vehicle in the district for quite a number of years. I want to say the last new buses that were purchased were pre-2007. There was a used bus that was purchased about 4 years ago. You have an attachment to this discussion item that gives you the status of your fleet of buses. You have 26 vehicles total. On that sheet, you'll see that 6 of those vehicles have been highlighted. All 6 of those vehicles are being recommended for replacement. They all have an excess of 245,000 miles. You actually have 9 vehicles in your fleet that have over 200,000 miles on them. And so the recommendation is to replace 6 buses. Along with this discussion item, and for your consideration, is a methodology to replace the buses by using a piggyback contract. There's an active contract with the Waterford Unified School District with A to Z buses, who we have done business with in the past. It's a guaranteed price on the vehicles. The contract is current, has piggyback clauses in it, and we are recommending 6 vehicles, 4 of them special needs, 2 of them regular education or regular home-to-school buses. And there's a pricing sheet that you see. There's a breakdown of the cost of the buses. The 2 special education buses, well, there's 2 different types of special education buses. One of them starts at $186,000, the other is $163,000, and the home to school bus is $142,000. 2 of each of them gives you a total cost to purchase the fleet or the replacements for the fleet of $936,000. There's an option to lease if you would prefer to lease in the A to Z contract. It would cost you financing of $46,905 for a 5-year cost of $983,790. We are looking at other financing options. This financing rate here is a 2.4% rate of interest. We think we can do better than that with the district's credit rating and their bonding capacity. And so we reached out to a couple other firms, and if the board chooses to move forward with this, we'll look at some other financing options that would cost less if you wanted to pay this over a 5-year period of time versus making a single payment of lump sum cash. So Information is there. I can answer any questions you have about the process or the status of your fleet, and we can go from there depending on your direction.
I do have a public comment. Linda McMahon?
I always have to talk about buses whenever it comes up, just to let you know. The expensive buses for over $900,000, and again, the last time purchase of buses was made in about 2006, which is the last time the district had money for salaries. And I believe that taking care of transportation is very, very important. But as at this time, this agenda item comes at a very questionable time when employees are watching the district's expenditures. And I want to offer a suggestion that the district look at implementing a plan and over the years, kind of like your tech plan of not letting the years go so long so that it doesn't, and this is going to sound very bad, it doesn't look like the district is spending money rather than giving it to employee salaries. So that, say, every year, every 2 years, okay, develop a plan, implement the plan, buy a bus, buy 2 buses, and then next year buy another couple of buses. And again, employee district relations are not at an all-time low, but they're sinking. And I need you to be aware of that. And that's all I want to say on buses. Thanks.
Yep. Ms. Leland?
I just had a comment that, I think providing transportation is important, and not to marginalize certain communities and provide that access. I do agree with you, Ms. McMahon, that we need to look at a long-term replacement plan. I also don't like the idea that we have 6 buses out there that are not working well or need replacement, and our kids are riding in them. And so my overall comment would be, do we have, because I know many districts have cut a lot of their transportation, and that was in a large part due to the 2008 economic downturn and loss of funding. We began to, in some ways, do things smarter and more efficient. But the buses didn't catch up with that. We don't have, as a school district, a philosophy or a policy of what commitment we have long-term to provide transportation to our students. The only policy or model that I think about is when we decided to go to the K-12 model. That was to the K-12, not K-8, I'm sorry. We are K-12. But when we went to the K-8 model, we had neighborhood schools, and that allowed students to be able to walk to their campuses, and that was the ideal behind the K-8 philosophy that we had. And then, again, that could relieve a need for buses. And so that's the only policy or philosophy that's kind of in writing somewhere about what we're going to do as a district long-term to provide transportation for our students. And so I think that's a bigger conversation. I know we don't have policy on transportation. There's no policy attached to this, so it's not about writing a policy, but at least having a philosophy about transportation first so that we're all on the same page. Because, we've all come on the board at different times so that we're all in agreement. And then, based on that philosophy, we begin to And I think we have a replacement plan. Yes, there was a long gap, but I think Scott wouldn't be bringing us the 6 that need the replacing if you didn't have some kind of system of assessing which buses this year need to be replaced. So I guess I'm not asking whether you have it. I don't need to know that right now. But a replacement plan is important. But before we do that, I think it's important to come up with a philosophy, a strategy, whatever you want to call it, of what we are going to do. Are we going to have streetcars to take our kids to new schools? I don't know. But we need to have some long-range idea. And especially as we're building new schools in the future, it's an important discussion.
Ms. Villegas?
I was actually happy to see the, not knowing the full agenda, the replacement of buses, because I think our buses are in bad repair, and I know a few of us up here really appreciate the fact that we've put money into our transportation system and getting kids to and from school. So, and it seems to make sense to do it on a annual basis rather than every 6-10 years. But I'd like to work out something so we can get new buses and safer buses for our kids to get back and forth through school.
I'm just going to say that I think, Mary, you touched on something very important. We need to look ahead. We just can't have sometimes knee-jerk type of reaction. The buses all of a sudden they need fixing. We have to, as Mary stated, have some sort of plan in place. And one of the first things when I was hearing about the buses, I'm thinking, well, it's going to be cost effective but safe for our children. And leasing seemed like an option I'd like to look at. But also we were looking at other things. I think as a district we have to look beyond that. We have to look at, new technologies. I mean, there are a lot of cars out there that are electric cars. We know that there's more efficiency. So I would also like to get more feedback from parents, from the community, before we make a lot of these choices. I think it's really important to hear what other people have to say, what the teachers have to say. And I believe that, with change, you have to be very methodical when you make these changes. Right now, I have this before me, and there are a lot of questions that I have, and I'm certain that, people have stated before, input's very important. But I think we do have to have some sort of plan in place as to how we approach these changes. And I think Mary's recommendation was very good. We have to have something in order, and looking at the future. And I had some questions also, how we do assess, what buses, and how we approach which buses we're going to be, replacing. Someone recommended 2 buses, a year, looking at that, rather than getting a whole fleet. We do have money coming in. We know, the state has told us we have more monies available. We want to be prudent in every decision that we make. So I, for one, would like to get a lot more public input.
Thank you. I agree with the rest of the board, all the comments that are made. And I think we all agree, it sounds like, with especially Mary's comments. I think we need to have a philosophy for the future on our transportation. And I know we are still one of a few districts that still are able to provide public transportation at no cost to our community. I'd like to see our elementary buses come back so we don't have students waiting all hours, double runs and things like that. So I know transportation is important to all of us, as well as the safety of our students. So I think this is a good time to start having the conversation so everybody can hear and everybody start putting in input. I kind of do like the idea of maybe looking at bringing in 2 buses a year or something versus 6 at one time, or 8 or 10, hint, hint. But I do think we need to look at a lot of the options, and this is a good start. So Scott, what do you want from us today? continued conversation?
I think I've heard continued conversation. If I could, just a couple of comments to make sure that we're all clear. We absolutely agree that there needs to be long-range planning, and I can bring back some information that shows you the long-range considerations. The 6 buses that we're asking to replace have a high level or high frequency of breakdown. They're getting old. 2 of the buses that are on the list, we're not allowed to drive more than $1,000 miles per year because they don't have particulate de-ashing traps on them for smog emissions. And they're not cost effective to add them. We added them to every other bus that we have except those 2 because it didn't make sense. It was a grant that we received through the state, and all but 2 of our buses qualified because it had to be cost effective to put it on the bus. So those are the vehicles that we're looking to replace, whether it's 2 this year or 2 next year. The fleet is old enough, and again, I've been here now 6 years, and we have not bought a new bus. And 6 years ago, we needed to consider looking at replacing buses. So I would suggest that maybe we bring in an outside entity to review or to look at the status of your fleet and make a recommendation as far as how you would get through and what is the typical life cycle. I'm very confident and comfortable in stating that, well, first off, the buses are safe. They all pass the CHP inspection. So let's be very clear that we do not have a single school bus on the road that is not safe for a child to be in. That's the most important thing. But what we have to look at is it's the frequency of breakdown, and it's as the buses are getting older, they're aging. And since we haven't done anything, if we just buy 2 buses a year, we are constantly going to be behind where we have a significant amount of the fleet that is broken down that isn't on the road because you have an older fleet versus a newer fleet. When you haven't replaced vehicles over a period of time, if you start doing it, you have to play catch up. I'll also get you some additional information that shows you the ratio of your home-to-school fleet versus your special education fleet. The special education fleet is growing. We have to add buses to that section of the fleet because of the amount of time that a special needs student can be on the bus. They can't be on the bus for extended periods of time. And when you have runs that are going out of town, to start trying to make the run where the student is picked up at whatever time in the morning, gets to school on time, you end up having to have more buses because you don't have 20 and 30 kids on a bus. You've got 10 and 15 tops. And so that has an impact on the size of your fleet. So if I'm hearing what the board is asking for, they're looking for a couple of things. One is a philosophy, and if you'd like us to pursue that, we certainly can. I'll have somebody come in, maybe a FICMAT or somebody else that can go and say, here's a philosophy on fleet replacement. Is that what you're asking to have done?
I thought it was more of a policy than a philosophy.
I think we need both. I think the philosophy will lead into a policy.
I think you could turn a philosophy into a policy if you felt strongly about that.
Okay.
Yeah. 'Cause we don't have one. I like the idea of FICMAT. I mean, we've asked FICMAT to come out. We've invited that on ourselves for our human resources, and I really think that is, but I would refer that back to staff if you think it meets that level too, because that's additional. Or we might be able to package the next FICMAT visit with a couple of other areas that we identify at some point.
Well, if I could suggest, we could reach out to them and find out, tell them, here's what we're looking to have evaluated, see what a cost is, and see if that cost is acceptable to the board. In the interim, we'll get you some additional information on the change in the ratio to the fleet and what we see as far as miles that are going on particular vehicles, how soon you're going to need to get into the next round of replacing vehicles based on age and probability of mechanical failure. I think it's also important to understand that we're getting into a window. If we push this down the road 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we are going to get to the point where we do not have enough buses on the road to handle the current load requirement that we have as far as kids that are on the side of the road. We're right on the cusp. We've put the buses together for years now. without buying them. And so at one point, we are going to need to address it. As far as how to pay for them, we have the concern about, balancing that with the other needs that the budget has right now. When we talked about this and mentioned this before, we mentioned this as being one of the things that the board could use their ending fund balance of one-time money to pay for, because this is a one-time purchase when you do it, unless, of course, you decide to do a recurring plan every couple of years. But this is different than doing an ongoing cost in other areas of the budget. This would be a one-time expense. It would be out of your one-time reserve.
Scott, do you have a deadline where you want this to be an action item for us, so we can work backwards from that?
Yeah, I need to go back and look, because it's, when you order a school bus, it's not sitting on a lot waiting for you. They're pretty much a made-to-order thing, and we are hoping to get new vehicles into the fleet before next school year, so I need to double-check on that. But it is sooner than later.
So FICMAT might be just for this.
Yeah, I think we need to maybe deal with replacing a couple of the buses and get that on as an action item. And the FICMAT philosophy policy could be a long-term kind of goal, or that we've set our priorities for this year. I don't know how far out you want to take it.
Just really quickly, I really want to look at leasing, because, you talk about how buses break down after a while. And when you lease, my understanding is when you're leasing, I've leased cars, they take care of a lot of the problem. Usually comes out to be more fiscally prudent also. And
But if you lease a vehicle and you're still going to be responsible for all the maintenance and wear and tear on the vehicle, and the warranty is going to cover the manufacturer's original warranty. And on these buses, I believe it's 2 years. I'd have to double check. So
it would depend on how often we lease them, because,
every
couldn't we determine
bus
that?
purchase that this district has made that I know of has been on a lease. And they're typically a 5-year lease, just like you would do on a car. And if we were to do a 5-year lease, then the leasing company is going to want us to commit money in the ending fund balance that'll pay for that lease over the 5-year period of time. So the advantage for us to leasing versus not leasing is, one, do you have cash on hand? And two, if I can get the lease rate, the finance rate low enough, we have a good rate of return, believe it or not, on LAIF, which is where we have our investments. If I can get the interest rate to lease that's lower than LAIF, then the district's actually making money on the deal, because I've got the money in the bank and I'm making more interest than I am in the interest payments I'm making on the bus. So that's what we're looking to do, is lease if it's not costing the district any more money, if we can actually net a positive return by keeping the money in the bank.
Excuse me, point of clarification, Scott, you're referring to a lease purchase, is that correct? I think there may be some confusion about leasing a vehicle that you have for 3 years and then return. You're talking about a lease purchase, is that correct?
That is correct. This is a lease purchase, 5 years.
so you would lease it, and then you'd have the option to buy
No,
at
at the end of the
5
lease, you own the vehicle.
Yeah, that's what's in the agenda
Yeah,
listed, but thank you for clarifying that.
I thought there might be some
Yeah.
confusion.
I have not seen a program that will lease a school bus to a school district for 3 years and then take the vehicle back and try and resell. But we can look into that option as well. Usually, once it goes to the school district, it's your vehicle.
I think if I'm hearing the board right, just to give you some direction, Scott, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, I think at this time, I think the board would like to place for action item on our next agenda 2 school buses, and then do the FICMAT for the rest, so we can get started.
Okay.
But I want to make sure that's the will of the board before we give you that direction.
I'm okay with that. And I think we have an item tonight that's going to discuss our budget, and there's some transportation costs in that might also kind of help with the next 4 buses that we need to talk about, because it's carved out as transportation in the budget report. So I'm comfortable with doing the 2 and looking at the budget item and FICMAT for the future. I'm fine with that.
Everyone?
I agree.
Is that good enough for you for right now?
Yeah, it gets us going in the right direction. So 2 vehicles, I'll work with transportation, and I'm pretty sure they're going to want to get 2 buses that have the wheelchair lift, because that's what their bigger need is. So, but I will confirm that. But I would venture to say you'll see 2 special needs buses that have built-in wheelchair lifts.
And I think we still want to work on philosophy towards a policy and also FICMAT. I think that's the way we're all kind of.
Correct. What I heard on the FICMAT study was a long-term philosophy on fleet purchases that could turn into a board policy, as well as just evaluating the fleet as a whole and what the turnover rate of the current fleet could be.
Yep, sounds good to us. Item number 3 is presentation preliminary schedule of events for the issuance of Measure V bonds.
Stacy's coming up from Government Financial Strategies, our third-party consultant and advisor in financial matters. She's going to be talking about our bond measure, and as we move forward with the use of Measure V successfully passed, and we also are looking at maybe a refi on some earlier debt that the board and district incurred in Measures Q and V, respectively. Stacy.
Great. Thank you for having me. Good evening, board, superintendent, staff, and members of the public. I'm here with a very brief update on Measure V and what the next steps are and when you'll expect to see us in the future and what types of decisions will be made. Sorry, technical difficulties. Well, there's only like 9 slides. If you want to move through them, I'll just say next slide. It'll be really fast, and we'll get that working for next time. So tonight, we're going to review the agenda. We're going to talk about fiscal stewardship in implementing the measure, as well as throughout your debt portfolio, and then the next steps. So next slide. So I know you've had some celebrations. I haven't formally congratulated all of you and the community on the good that will be done for students because of Measure V. So it's an outstanding success with the 67.4% of voters approving the measure. So congratulations. I'm not going to read the measure to you. I know you lived and breathed it for many months, but I did want to put it on here because this is what most people saw when they saw the measure and what they voted on. And there was some backup in the voter pamphlet, but this is what people actually write bonds yes or bonds no on. So next page. The measure that was put on the ballot included a project list that was based on the capital investment plan. It had a prioritization framework that was suggested by the community input team, and all of that was included in the voter information, as well as the tax rate statement. It included $49.8 million in bonds that should be issued in 3 series, which would net $47.7 million for projects. This projected a $39 per $100,000 of assessed value tax levy, and that was based on a 4% assessed value growth. It had a citizen oversight component, and the meeting of the first Citizens Oversight Committee was February 18th, and I was there and presented some best practices on community oversight. So thank you for having me there too. So the next slide, I wanted to give you an update. When we put the bond on the ballot, we did not have updated assessed value for the 14-15 fiscal year. So we based it on a 4% growth rate, and the district got a 7.71% growth rate. So that's almost 2 years worth of growth in 1 year. And when you're planning a measure like that, growth in the early years is very, very good. And I'll explain that in a few slides. So one other thing to point out here is the assessed value increases according to Prop 13. And in each year, most of the properties actually increased by the lesser of either 2% or the change in the California Consumer Price Index. And you could see there's been a few times, those are the red bars on the bottom of the graph, there's been a few times where it's been less than 2%. And this year was one of those years. So you still had the 7.71% increase in a year where the base rate was increased quite a bit lower than a normal 2% year. So the other thing on page 6, thank you. The other thing that's happened between when we planned the measure and now is interest rates have dropped. They're not they're fluctuating quite a bit still, but they are lower. And you could see the little brackets about where interest rates were when we planned the measure and how much lower they are now. So that is also good news when you're thinking about planning the bond measure. So this was the original financial plan. We had it issued in 3 series, 2015, 2017, and 2019, and that minus all the costs would allow $47.7 million for projects. So this was also based on an expenditure schedule that was from early 2014. So there has been a lot of work to get where you are now and what needs to be done and what your plans are based on the capital investment program. So we're working with staff to refine this, but it looks like at a minimum you could reduce one of those series, which is fantastic because you save on cost of issuance, which means that money will be more money for projects. So that's at a minimum one of our goals. So we're going to be refining this over the next month with staff, and we'll have the final plan when we come back to you. So Dayton previewed that there's also a potential refinancing opportunity. Sorry for the small writing on this, but this is how we view your debt portfolio. And I like to think of it like an investment portfolio, except we want this to be reduced over time. We want it to be shorter, and we want less interest costs. Whereas if you had your personal investment portfolio, you would want all the opposites. You'd want higher interest costs and longer time for your returns. But so when we look at this, like in this format, a few numbers stand out, and we're watching this regularly on behalf of Washington Unified. But ones that I wanted to point out here is you have 2 bonds that have 2016 call dates. That's August 1st, 2016 for both of them. That is some from Measure Q and some from Measure R. And with the lower interest rates and the fact that we're already going to the bond market this year, it's likely those are going to be very good refinancing opportunities. We're not presenting any numbers tonight because we're still a little ways away from your information item, which I'll talk about, but we wanted to bring that to your attention, that this was part of the fiscal stewardship of your portfolio, and if they're good candidates to be refinanced, we're going to bring that forward as well. That would save taxpayers money, and that's always a good thing. So typically these would be looked at to be refinanced next year, but because you're already going to the bond market now, the costs will be lower to go to the bond market now, and the cost of issuance will be reduced. So in the next presentation, I'll detail all of that, but I wanted to give you a preview of the interesting things that are happening in your debt portfolio. So on page 9, these are the next steps. I'll be back in front of you on April 23rd, and I'll give you much more detail on what the final proposed plan will be, how many bond issuance, what will be in the first series, and we'll give a recommendation on method of sale. We'll also give more detail on the refinancing if we believe it's a good candidate, which at this point it still is, and recommendations on moving forward with that. Then on May 14th, the board will consider approval of all of the documents for the financing. You've gone through this a number of times, most recently with certificates of participation last year. And then we have the bond sale scheduled currently for June 18th. As always, anybody who's interested in coming to our offices just across the river, welcome to come and watch the bond sale, and I'll give you more detail about what that would look like and more details on April 23rd. And then the district will schedule to receive bond funds on July 7th, and then at your July board meeting, most likely, I'll be back to present the results of all of the sales. So that's your preview. I'm wondering if you have any questions.
Ms. Leland?
No, I'd like to say that we naturally had a crystal ball that interest rates would decline if we, voted to put this bond on the ballot, and that we would have an assessed value of almost double. Mm-hmm. But the refinancing, which you're going to bring back to us, I think is important to note. I'd love to have an opportunity to remind the public that in refining Measure R, I think we saved the taxpayer $900 and something thousand, and then when we refinanced Measure Q, we saved $3,718,000. That is a lot of savings, and so I just want to remind the board and the public that I think we're on the right track, and I'm anxious to get the report in April from you. But appreciate the positive report, and
looking forward to working on some of the projects that this will fund for our students.
Yeah, thank you. And I know in the run-up to the election and putting the bond on the ballot, we did talk about those savings and how the district has been good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
I just wanted to have another opportunity.
I will bring
to
it
say
back as well, so you can see how this will add to the total.
So if we refinance again, we can save even more money,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And that will go reduce the taxes that you would have collected and taken and given to investors and given back to your residents of West Sacramento.
Go, Stacy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll see you in April.
Action item number 1, to accept the demographic study 2015. That's
In front of you, you have the most current demographics report. This is a report that we, for a while, we're not doing every year, and then we started doing it every year as construction started to pick up again so that we could have an indication of what we saw as far as what the future holds for the district in results, or excuse me, in respect to growth. And if you were to go through the report, you'll see that it's a strong report. It does show that the district anticipates growth. I believe over the projected period of time in here, it's some 600 students. And next year's growth is in the area of 150 students. So a strong report. There's really not a lot for the board to do with this report other than accept the report that the demographer has done, and then we will take it in-house and we'll use it in a variety of different ways to help us project where our population is going. We'll start doing this report, as I said, every year now that development is picked up again, because I think of interesting note in this report, we continue to talk about the Liberty project and what that potentially brings to the district. In this particular report, it has very little impact because they haven't pulled their permits yet. So we have to keep going back because they use, the data that they use is what is active data with the city. And right now, the Liberty project isn't active. So we keep going back to this report to make sure that we pick up and have the most current amount of information. So I can answer any questions that you have on it. And we are just asking for the board to accept the demographer's report.
Is there any questions, comments? I have a motion to accept the demographic study 2015.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Action item number 2, to adopt board resolution number 1415-25, opening the building fund, Fund 21.
This action item, or this board resolution that is in front of you, is going to be required of the board to be able to accept the bond proceeds from Measure V that Ms. Farrick was just discussing with you. So we're kind of getting ahead of it here. I want to get the fund opened up so that when the bond is sold near the end of this year, we'll actually have the fund in place for them to be able to make the deposits from escrow. Fund 21 is defined under the California School Accounting Code, the SACS code, as the fund that bond proceeds are supposed to be deposited into. We kind of go then, well, if we've had bonds in this district before, how come we don't have this fund opened? It was closed after the last series of bonds no longer had any proceeds left in them. I think we discussed this, and Board Member Leland, you may remember this. We closed a couple of funds a few years ago because they didn't have ongoing annual activity. You can't just leave a fund open and stagnant with no activity in it. So Fund 21 was closed at one point. Now with the new bond being online, we need to open Fund 21 again. So this resolution just asks the board, or has the board give authority to the county controller and the county office of education to open up Fund 21 on behalf of the district.
Well, I can say it's a lot more fun opening the fund than closing it, and so I'm excited about this particular action item, and it's fairly routine from my perspective.
And when you open the fund, it's just for depositing, right? Nobody's taking out, nobody's doing anything, it's just for depositing.
No, actually, Fund 21 then will be the fund that is used for all the revenue and expenditures associated with Measure V. It is your bond redemption fund that the money comes into, and you roll your expenses out of it as well.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not mingled with other funds, and then I think it makes it even more transparent with the community where the money was spent. So it really serves a good purpose for that reason.
No, it's fine, thank you.
Do I have a motion to adopt Board Resolution number 1415-25, opening the building fund, Fund 21?
So moved.
A second?
Second?
This is a roll call vote. Ms. Alcala?
Aye.
Ms. Leland?
Aye.
Ms. Villegas?
Aye.
And I too vote aye. Item number 4, approve the second interim financial report for fiscal 2014-15.
That's good, because I looked at that.
Hello again. Your interim report for second interim for fiscal 14-15. We'll go over this with you. I'll be as brief as I can. There's a lot of information here. I've got a couple things for you during this reporting period that you haven't been shown before, because I think we have a different set of variables that we want to make sure we're paying attention to. So beginning of the report, we'll talk about what we've discussed in the past, that the budget life cycle of a typical budget in a school district is approximately 22 months. In the current dynamic that we're in, we're working in 2 fiscal years. We're working in the current year, which is 14-15. We've already started planning for 15-16. We always want to maintain a positive budget certification. That is a recommendation for this submittal as well. And the definition of a positive certification is there for you. We never want to be qualified or negative, because those are not good things, and that's the definition for your edification on a qualified or a negative district. So getting to the crux of it, here is your LCFF target. The target has increased to $68.8 million. It is based on the most current model, the FCMAT local control formula calculator. It's version 15.3B2. It was released January 7th of 2015. It reflects, again, like I said, $68.8 million, and this really represents what the state is hoping to achieve, which is fully funding the local control funding formula in 8 years. If you'd like to see it as a graph instead, this is graphically what it looks like. The big blue part, that is the base formula. So when you look at the local control funding formula and people talk about all the different parts and pieces of it, that is graphically how it shapes up, and 79% of our funding is base formula. The next part that we look at in the interim report is the entitlement, and I think it's very important to see that the entitlement in the interim reporting period changed. And it changed significantly, and we'll get into the details of that. It changed by $722,295, and we'll detail that for you. The multi-year projection in your local control funding formula uses the state Department of Finance's percentages for 15-16 and 16-17 as far as the funding gap at 32.19% and 23.71%. Always worth noting that the Department of Finance estimates assume a best-case scenario, because that's how they run their budgets. Estimates were last updated January of 2015, and the funding gap dollar amounts really show that they're making a very concerted effort to meet fully funding the local control funding formula in 8 years. If you recall, when this first started a couple years ago, there's a lot of skepticism about whether or not the state would be able to pull off funding the local control funding formula in 8 years. But they keep getting aggressive with their gap percentages, and so they're looking a little bit more positive every cycle that they go through. Here is your unrestricted and restricted general fund for the current year and the next 2 years. Several things of importance to point out on this slide. The first is that you have a new committed line that we talked about at the last interim report, and this is for the one-time mandate block grant payment that we received of $476,000. And we had conversation, and the board agreed that it would be good to commit that to Common Core expenditures in the 15-16 school year. So we're going to roll those dollars forward for 15-16 because we still have Common Core money that we have to spend this year, and then we'll have money for next year as well. Two other things to highlight. Ending fund balance increased, which you heard from comments from WTA, and it increased because you had a net surplus in your unrestricted general fund. You had a net deficit in your restricted general fund, which is what you want to see. You want to spend your restricted dollars before you spend your unrestricted dollars. Ending fund balance on the restricted side is less than $100,000. That's good. Again, you're going to have a surplus in the unrestricted side. However, there are things to consider when you look at this particular part or this particular document. And the first is that for 15-16, 16-17, we continue to use 50% of the Department of Finance revenue figure. So where the Department of Finance is expecting about a 9% increase for us, that funding gap percentage equates to a 9% increase, we assume 4.5. And that's the way we've been building our multi-year projections. And then as the governor's budget rolls through, we continue to update them. Expenses year over year increase at a rate of 2%, and that's across the board, step and column and all over expenses, because that's typically what we've seen in a normal year. There are no costs associated with any collective bargaining salary benefit increase anywhere in the multi-year projection, and it's not in your current 14-15 budget. And the committed funds, again, that we've talked about, of $476,000 are in there. So important things to note when you look at the multi-year projection. So the biggest question is, what changed in the fund balance? How come the fund balance has a surplus of $2 million? We'll go through that. The first thing that happened is there is a transfer of $900,000 as a transfer in that is under your expenses and under your revenues from fund borrowing from last year from Fund 12 and Fund 13 that was not put into the budget. It actually shows as a to-date transaction. You'll see it in column C in the SACS forms where it shows activity to date of $900,000 because that money was already paid back with short-term borrowing because those two funds need to make payroll. And they are funds that are very dependent on the state or the feds reimbursing them after they put in for their expense things. And when they're running as tight of a budget as they don't have the cash to be able to bridge that June, July timeframe. So we do interfund borrowing. It's very standard, and we do it all the time. It just wasn't set up in budget. So you had this one-time jump of $900,000 because you had this interfund borrowing that we now have a budget line for that we didn't have before. And this transfer, you can see it in two places in the report. The variance report, page 13, and on page 16 in the general fund column D, item D.1.A, you'll see that $900,000, and that was not there in your first interim report. Second issue has to do with your increase in your target. So your target went up to $68.8 million. You'll notice that it went up primarily from one factor, and that is your ADA. In the past, we have not put P2 ADA into the budget report until after month 8, which is April. And we've said as the state's budget got more stable and it was more predictable and we weren't getting mid-year cuts where we put a budget together, and then in January we were told you're going to lose 5% or 10%. We continue to be conservative. As their budget got more stable, we said we wanted to start projecting that P2 ADA into the financials sooner than later. So that's the difference in between first interim and second interim, is you had an increase of 115.41 ADA as noted on this graphic right here. It also, again, I think I pretty much said, this is not past practice. The past practice has been to wait until after we actually got the P2 report. But we have a formula where we watch the ratio of seabeds to P2 ADA every year. and we take the seabeds number, we take the average, and so we're pretty comfortable that this number is obtainable. Are we going to hit 115.41? No, because we're not getting the exact same percentage of ADA year over year. It varies. It's going to be off by a couple of tenths. What that translates to you is an entitlement increase. And that entitlement increase you saw, and I told you I'd come back to, is $722,295. That's what the impact of 115 ADA has going through the local control funding formula calculation. So you have your P1 number of 53.6 million, your P2 number of 54.3 million. The difference is $722,295. Reconciliation of the the increase in fund balance, just so you can see the difference in between the two. You see your second interim report up top with $2,073,000 is the surplus versus first interim of $331,000. If you take your $2,073,000, take out the $900,000 one-time transfer, the $722,000 increase from ADA, the $300,000 previous surplus, you end up with $119,000 variance. That $119,000 variance is actually in the variance report that starts on page 9. It's all those things where it says salaries and benefits went down by this because of that, or supplies went up because we made an additional purchase and it went up by $30,000 or $40,000. That's where the detail for the rest of that $119,000 lies. So with this, since we are putting in ADA that we typically haven't done before, we thought it would probably be beneficial to do a risk assessment on the second interim report so that we're all clear on the risks that we have with this particular document. And there's 3 major risk factors. The first one, as I said, this budget report that you have in front of you for 14-15 does not have any expenses in it associated with salary or benefit compensation increases. It's not in there yet, because we haven't settled with any of the collective bargaining units. So that's a big risk factor. Second risk factor is what we just talked about. We're putting in P2 ADA before April 2015. We're comfortable that we'll be close to, but the bet is how close are we going to be to our historical performance? I don't know that yet. And the third risk factor to this report is in your multi-year projection, you have two new charter schools that are going to open in the fall. And we do not know yet what that is going to do to our enrollment. The demographics report had us growing by about 150 kids. There's a possibility that with the opening of 2 new charter schools, you could be in declining enrollment, because with the projected numbers for Lighthouse Charter and some of the students coming from the Epic Charter, we could see 200 kids leave the district schools and end up in charter schools, and you'd be in declining enrollment next year. So it's just a consideration, something that we'll keep an eye on. We'll continue to monitor as we have conversations working through the MOU with the Lighthouse Charter School, their operational MOU, a better idea of what their enrollment number looks like, what they're expecting to have, and we'll be able to modify accordingly. So the next steps for us are actually simple, if I can use a term. We're going to continue to monitor the student attendance in P2 to make sure that the numbers that we have rolling through the budget, we're actually going to see in an appropriation. We'll make adjustments as appropriate for that. We're going to monitor, like I said, the 15-16 charter school enrollment and adjust the multi-year projection as appropriate depending on what their enrollment numbers look like. And we'll continue our prudent fiscal planning and recognition of LCAP Year 2, which is a big thing we didn't talk about tonight, but the cost of LCAP Year 2 and the VAPA plan and the tech plan and the other things that we need to make sure we address for the 15-16 budget cycle. And we'll also monitor activities in the capital in regards to the state's budget for fiscal year 15-16. Questions?
Dawn, I have you for a public comment, but did you want to hear the item number 3 before you make, because they were switched, they were reversed? Mm-hmm. Do you want to hear item number 3 before your public comment, or do you want to come up now? Okay.
Hi. The first was a comment on the estimates for next year. if you read through the second interim, it talks about the state's economy is showing signs of slowing down. Actually, I went and looked up a few sources, including Bloomberg and Wells Fargo. The state's economy is growing, or at worst, at steady state. It's not slowing down. And given the governor's budget proposal in January, given the economic news that even has come in as recently as yesterday, I don't think there's any basis to assume that the growth rate in our LCSF calculator is going to be less than what the Department of Finance estimated. I think that number is going to be a real number. When I've talked to people that I know involved in budgeting, they say that number looks pretty good. By being overly conservative here, you may be underestimating district revenue on the order of $3 million next year. So that's a sizable amount of money. I do have a couple questions on some of the items. I'm wondering if we can have a little bit more detail on what is included in the capital outlay expenditures. And then the second question, kind of a follow-up on that, are any of those funds in the capital outlay going to be recovered through things like the E-rate and other things that are used to purchase stuff? Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
I would like staff to maybe address or clarify anything.
They can. It's a public comment.
If they feel a need to, and if not, we can go on to board comments.
Do you have that information with you, Scott?
Which part of Mr. Stauffer's comment?
Was it the detailed expenditures?
I do not have detailed capital outlay with me. I can get the board detailed capital outlay.
I'm sorry, Scott, I didn't hear you.
I do not have detailed capital outlay expenditures with me. I can get that for you.
And that would go along with the recoverable? That would be in the same
Yeah,
information, right?
The comment about recoverable from something such as E-rate is, the answer to that is no. We typically don't recover capital outlay through E-rate. Quite frankly, we don't budget E-rate because E-rate comes in when they get done evaluating your applications. E-rate is anywhere from a year to two behind, and it's probably one of the most volatile sources that I think we have as far as timeliness of their submission. So what we've always done with E-rate is when E-rate comes in, we've added it to the technology budget, and they've used it to expand technology, whether it be hardware or classroom supplies, but it's always gone back to technology.
I just want to say it was a great report, good PowerPoint. I appreciated it. And I think that we have been fiscally prudent. I know we're in the first year of the LCAP funding. I'd like to see what happens next year. But I'm really hoping that we can keep from deficit spending. And can you tell me how many years we've had a positive certification here in the district?
I've been with the district since February of 2009, and we've had a positive certification for every fiscal report that I've brought to the board.
So from the day you started here, we have been positively certified. That's
correct.
That's correct, yes.
Any more comments, questions? Can I get a motion to approve the second interim financial report for fiscal 2014-15?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we'll go back to action item number 3 to approve the second interim 2014-15 budget transfers.
I have to go backwards in my book. I'll just do these really quick.
Sorry.
Kylie said,
She
go
didn't
ahead.
come-
She
Kylie
said,
didn't
no,
wanna come up here?
come on up. She said, no,
Say
go
hi
ahead.
to us?
You want to come down?
No?
So since you approved the second interim report, what this agenda item is this agenda item is all the budget transfers that happened in between the first interim report and the date that the data was put together for second interim report. So we need your approval on these budget transfers so we can transfer the approval to the county office of ed. They'll update the budget and the financial system. So the new budget that we're working with will be the budget that you just approved in your second interim report.
Comments, questions?
I have a question. So you're talking about the transfers, but you haven't still calculated what salaries and, I'm sorry, what's that? 3 items on there? What we're missing? You haven't still calculated the ADA, you said, as well as what the impact of the charters, the 2 new charter schools are, or the increase in salary or benefit compensation. So,
Yeah.
no, I'm saying, I just didn't, I wanted to understand.
To explain, what you have here with these transfers, it's the numbers that you have in the interim report right now that have the revenue expenses that produce a unrestricted general fund surplus of $2 million. These are the transfers. These are the transactions that happened in between the last reporting period and this reporting period.
Minus this.
These other things aren't going to be in there because I couldn't put a number for that because we don't know what that number is yet. The ADA is in here.
All right.
So the issue is whether or not we've met the target with the ADA. It's different than what we've done before. We've always put the ADA in after we've seen it, and here we're putting the ADA in ahead of time. So we're doing a little bit different this time. So really you have 2 things that are unaccounted for per se, and that would be any salary and benefit increases and the impact of declining enrollment if we even have it. We don't know that yet. And we'll talk about some things in the budget for next year that we'll put in place to help balance against declining enrollment.
Okay.
So can I have a motion to approve the second interim 2014-15 budget transfers?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Item number 5, to approve professional service agreement with TCOM.
Good evening, members of the board. This is an action item regarding a consultant contract for critical work that needs to be done in IT. As you're aware, we have a recent departure of our Director of Informational Technology, and he was very intimately and critically involved in a number of the construction projects that we have, providing expert information and expert work that was needed to keep these programs and these projects going. What this allows us to do is, while we're in the process of searching and replacing for that individual, that we are able to keep on track with our major projects like Bright and Bridgeway and the district office work that needs to be done. There's a lot of work in tech specs and RFPs and various things on the technical side for keeping those projects moving. And so that's what this is designed to do. It's a 45-day patch.
Any questions, comments?
So this, I do. So the service agreement you're saying is for 45 days with TCOM? Or for how long?
It's a 45-day.
It's a 45 day?
45 calendar days, yes.
Right, and then we revisit again?
Our hope is to have a person in place in that time. We were trying to keep this window realistic, but ambitious, so that we would have a director of IT person in place.
Okay, thank you.
Can I get a motion to approve the professional service agreement with TCOM?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Down to consent items. Can I get a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Item number 7 to, oh, we already did all those, sorry. Board of Governance discussion. Do we have anything we need to discuss? I'm just working on the worksheet.
Thank you.
Future board agenda items?
I would really like to have a discussion, or put it about the single-member district for school board. I know you mentioned that that had been brought up in the past, and I'd like to bring that up again for discussion.
You know, I saw a list of items that we did last board meeting. And does that not carry over on this agenda? Because I can't remember what they were.
That's right. We didn't get that on this agenda, but we do have that list, and that was mentioned at the last meeting. We're working with the county voter registrar's office to come back to the board with information about the precinct areas. Is that what you're referring to?
Well,
Ms.
I'm
Hall?
talking about single-member
Pardon me?
districts. Yes,
Okay.
single-member
Yes,
districts.
we're working on that, and we'll get that list on the next agenda.
Okay. Anything else? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Everybody have a nice St. Patrick's Day.